Hey guys, Tommy Carrigan with Tommy Untamed. We've got a great show coming up. Thank you for watching.
Guest no show. So we are gonna do a solo rant, which are, you know. And am I gonna make this analogy? Yes, I am. But what's the quote about? It's okay to be fearful, or like bravery isn't the absence of fear; it's action despite it. If you're not fearful, then it's not bravery. And I think that's primarily reserved for like war fighters getting the Medal of Honor. Am I going to apply that to this podcast? Yes. Is it really a solo rant if I was prepared and if I had a topic I wanted to talk about? Or is it only a solo rant and I have no idea what I'm doing and I'm flustered? I think it's the latter because I have no idea what I'm doing and what's it called? I have no idea what I'm doing and I have nothing planned. God, I hate Apple autocorrect so it is so bad. It is so bad. What has even happened? I feel like it wasn't this bad a month ago. Um, but yeah, is it really a solo rant if I'm prepared and ready for it? Because I mean, when I go into one planned, I show up and I'm not only do I have a topic that I want to talk about, but I also go into it like I do my morning routine, and it's just a normal show where it's instead of having a guest, it's just me. That too is like there's something so odd about, and it's why I really dislike, but understand, but dislike no show was no call no show where it's just they're not here because then I normally wait 15 minutes and I ping them and like you there, what are you doing? So then there's this whole it's feel like you're at a starting line and there keeps being like false pistols and it just starts to throw you. And then you start, well, am I gonna do a solo one? Is the guest gonna show up? Do I want to start doing a solo one and then the guest and then so when you have to lean it. No one cares. Why am I saying this? Nobody cares. No one cares what the process is behind this. Why am I even talking? I'm saying this as if I'm Martin Scorsese or Tom Brady talking about my pregame ritual. No one cares. Truly, no one. I don't care. All right, so noted. Um, but I think it's interesting. My buddy Rev showed it to me, but I'd heard it before about not the original, because I think the Nazis actually had some functioning night vision, which is wild. But the ones used in Vietnam, the early ones, I don't know if it was just by SF or MACV-SOG, but it was the red night vision, which I guess was just the earliest one, and how they would see demons. And it wasn't like a one off, and it wasn't like no, it wasn't even like a one off. Like it was a group of guys who just they all saw something, and it's like, all right, maybe it were they drugged or something. But time and time again, guys at all different. I've done zero research on this. I watched like a 5 minute video. Time and time again, though, got all different ranks, different branches, would all have these to the point where they'd open fire because they would just see these grotesque gargoyle demons and not even like a mirage where it's just like a scary thing pops out. But this one guy talks about how like they were flying this night mission in Hueys and some scared grunt in the back just started dumping an M60 to the point where the other Hueys information peeled away because the firing was so sporadic they didn't want to get hit. And I think they like I don't know put the guy on medical leave or something. But this kept happening, and this guy who kept happening to this men under him. Finally, one day he was like, what are you like? What is going on? And he put it on, and his recounting of it, recalling of it, was horror. Just like monstrous, like warp demons. But I think the thing that got me was like he also explained how it wasn't all like, I don't know, for lack of a better phrase, it wasn't all action scenes. There was like, he said, you look up into the trees and you would just kind of see them sitting there like birds, and some of them would look, and when one flew, they'd all fly. But and if you took them off, nothing. Just a quiet night, just like the bugs, zzz, 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 like the night stars twinkling. But you would see these demons, and I mean, I wonder if that is something. Is that like? So we're already just going off in a left field. If you're hoping for some like interesting or like grounded take, that is not what this show is at all. That's not what this particular one is. Leave now. Um, but I almost wonder if that is something. If they saw sort of like psychic residue around something like a war, where there's always trauma. There's always, my own day. There's the emotions of like depression, anxiety, like happiness, like uh, I don't know, motivation at the gym or playing video games or doing the pod. I'm like, I want to build it. I want to, but it would have to be something like extreme. Like there's probably like a darkness or a heaviness around like a hospital. But this is different than that. This seems to be like exceedingly dark. Because you'd expect it around a hospital. You'd expect either from old age or young people in accidents or, even, like pediatric oncology or something. You'd expect that. I don't know if you'd expect demons. I feel like you'd expect like a sadness, like a heaviness. But in the same way, anxiety and depression are both unfavorable emotions, but they're not really the same. They are under the broad category of not enjoyable. Wouldn't do that again. But I feel like that's about where the similarities end. I know for me at least, and I have no idea where this show is. I can already feel it just falling off a cliff. For me at least, I know that there's, anxiety is absolutely debilitating. It is. It's like all the senses are overwhelmed, and I have to return to. There's either like an out full blown panic attack, which in a weird way, panic attacks are horrible, but afterwards it's almost like throwing up. There's just like an exhaustion. You feel physically exhausted, but they're debilitating in a way that like truly cannot function. Depression is. I would always choose depression over anxiety because depression to me is. I'm just like tired and hungry. But about there, that seems to be like the similarities between them is like they're unenjoyable. I don't I don't think you would say that's, and maybe that is demons. Maybe there's like a demon of depression, a demon of anxiety. But I feel like outright horror demons, I feel like that is something that you would see around just base depraved inhumanity. Like it's harder to like pin a death at the hospital on someone, right? It's hard to get mad. You can. Okay, hang now. Ow. You can, but there's kind of no sticking power. You can't in your bones feel anger at cancer. You can at the scenario, at the helplessness of it. but it's not the same as someone murdered your friend, your wife, your dog, whatever. There's heartbreak and there's relationships, and that, okay, sure, there can be abusive partners, but even that, there's like a whole realm of, you're responsible, you stayed in that relationship. But in my mind, as if I'm charting the laws of where psychic demons exist, as if I have any idea what I'm talking about right now. I feel like something where there's like the imposition of one's will on someone else. Even a drunk driver, you didn't, that person didn't set it, I don't think. That person didn't set out to kill your friend at an intersection. It doesn't mean that they weren't careless and selfish and blah, blah, blah. But even that, I imagine it's not the same as like the anger you'd feel at a serial killer or like a robbery. And you could say, well, the person set out to do a robbery; they didn't necessarily want to kill it. And it's like you made a decision. It might be that like demons are like the densest residue. Terrence McKenna say like inventions are the condensations of our creativity or something. Inventions are the condensations of our imaginations. Some Terrence McKenna-esque, just wild statement, but maybe what we perceive as demons is actually just, it's like the equivalent of a black hole. Where it's like, I think a weird thing for me when taking physics, like chemistry, however far down college chemistry goes, I don't think you're necessarily talking about vibrational strings. But you start with your elementary. It's a proton and a neutron. Says hello to the electron, and how those build into atoms, and then the atoms into bigger atoms, and chemical reactions between the atoms and molecules, blah blah blah, and then that gives way to the macromolecules, the organics, biologicals, and then that gives way to cellular biology, cells in relation to other tissues, tissues into organs, organ systems, people, blah 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 blah. One thing that got me about physics, though, even though I always like I knew it, one thing that got me was, I think it was astronomy, and like learning, like the sun just seems so categorically different than a planet. And it's just like, oh, this is a planet, this is a big rock, and that's why it condensed on itself. We have a molten core, and less dense are asteroids. They're not big enough to kind of collapse on themselves. And then less dense than that are gas clouds and nebulae and blah blah blah. But one thing that always just kind of got me was the realization that stars truly are just, it's just more matter. They're just bigger planets. They shine, and there's a light aspect, and they turn into these nuclear fusion furnaces. But if you didn't have eyes, if you couldn't detect warmth, if you couldn't detect temperature, so if you didn't have vision or temperature detection, just on a map, if you just had a map that was just simply looking at things as density, you would just assume that the sun was just a giant planet. And that's something that you couldn't detect warmth, if you couldn't detect temperature. So if you didn't have vision or temperature detection, just on a map, if you just had a map that was just simply looking at things as density, you would just assume that the sun was just a giant planet. And that's something that always got me, was that it was nothing different. It was just more matter. You can go one step further and say, and that's what a black hole. And then it gets even weirder, because you're like, all right, so there's planets, and then there's bigger planets, and there's gas planets, and okay, and then something happens where they implode on themselves and burst into light. And they're flaming and have these magnetic fields and spurts and flares, and So you go, okay, you had enough of it, this crazy light thing. Yeah, well, then you go even further, and actually it goes back down the bell curve, and then they get really dark. They actually get so dark that nothing comes out of them. But it's all still, if you just couldn't detect temperature and you didn't have sight to detect light and dark, if you were just simply looking at things based on mass, you would say, yeah, the sun's it's just a huge planet. And then you would say, and a black hole is just an even bigger one. Even though they're all still on the same spectrum of just adding more and more shit to a given point. So, in that same sense, I wonder if that's what this sort of demonic vision through the red night vision of Vietnam really was. It might be something like your baseline depression, not even really based on anything, just your human condition. Like today it's cloudy. You know, it's just a little more. I got 8 hours sleep, went to the gym, blah blah blah. But there's just a level of, you're a little flatter versus when when you're looking outside and it's just a dazzling sun. It's but you have your depression, you have your anxiety, you have anniversaries where you lose someone and yada yada yada. Those might be like planets or like gas clouds, and then even more might be like a, I don't know, a deeper, longer trauma where it's not a day of depression. It's man, I've just been laid off job after job, and I can't believe I'm on food stamps or I'm on unemployment, or and then it might be, everyone in your immediate vicinity is maybe it's on like a factory leaving town, right? And you do see those small towns across America where there's sort of a deeper, longer thing where it's not just a bad, quote unquote, bad day. It's not a lesser day because it's a little cloudy. It's something a lot more real. You lost a job, or you can't provide, or you guys are gonna have to leave your hometown where your dad grew up and your dad's dad grew up, and blah blah blah. That one's a little more real. It's not gonna pass because the sun comes out. Versus right now, if the sun came out, like my mood would shift. If it started raining, it would probably shift even darker. And I don't mean like it's fine, but it's a hair less than happy go lucky. When you have something deeper and more weightful, like persistent unemployment or drug addiction, and the two can go hand in hand, right? You get the Rust Belt, and then why do people turn to fentanyl? And it's like, well, because everything else is. And then what if you didn't just have that on one person? So, right? I mean, that kind of the density of that negative emotion, it's a lot bigger than, oh, it's cloudy. The sun comes out. Hey, the sun's out. It doesn't really have the same. I'm sure it does, but it doesn't really alleviate like an opioid addiction or you know yeah, chronic unemployment, no upward mobility. And if you do want upward mobility, you have to leave the town where you grew up and and you love, and again, your family's been forever. That's a lot. That's kind of heavier. It has more roots. And then what happens when it's not just you? What happens when it's everyone in the town? Well, then you could scale up even more and be like, well, what about when you're a country? What if when you're a whole country? Or if you're just getting taken advantage of by bigger powers? Yeah, I could see where, as like an emotion, an unenjoyable emotion, be it depression, anxiety, apathy, nihilism, despair, then you start getting up to like a rocky planet worth worth of mass being this unenjoyable emotion. Maybe that goes into a star, right? Where then all of a sudden there's this like categorical shift to where you go, oh, but it's still the same thing. It's still just an escalation of matter to a finite point. Then you can go even farther and then get black hole, where physics themselves start to, well, it's physics doesn't break down. We always say that. We go, black holes are crazy because the laws of physics break down. They don't break down. Our understanding, our model breaks down. They're not breaking any laws. They just are. It's like saying, once you get high enough in a hot air balloon, are the laws of longitude and latitude break down. Like, no, 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 no. You're just basing that on a flat Earth model. Your model's wrong. Nothing's breaking down. But you get something like a black hole or a white hole or a neutron star where they kind of don't even shine, but like a teaspoon weighs more than the Atlantic Ocean or something. But it is still, it's just more matter. That's all it is. It's just more and more matter. It's not something like biological life where I don't think you could argue, not even argue, I don't think you could prove that it's like more matter, right? I mean, some things you could, a baby versus an adult. But it's more of like horizontal differences. Like, yeah, you take me, I'm 200 pounds. You take another 200-pound thing. Like, you couldn't compare and go, well, this dumbbell weighs 200 pounds, so therefore it must have the same IQ as Tommy. Like, no, it's just metal. That's different, where it seems to be more complexity based or determined. It's anchored to a complexity chain, right? And then that's the whole argument that, or theory that, I don't know if it's an argument, but it's a theory that's where consciousness arises from is just increase in complexity. Which I don't know if that's true. I mean, it's certainly a similarity to where it seems like there's really nothing more complex in the human brain, right? 100 billion neurons, 100 trillion connections, and the way it uses glutamate and potassium and, action potentials and hyperpolarization and that chandelier cells. I always use that as an example because I just remember reading an article on that forever. That they didn't know what chandelier cells were. Maybe they figured that out now. Now my analogy is dated. I'm like using a 500-year-old analogy. I'm like, yeah, it's more difficult than the Queen's name. Shut the fuck up. So it doesn't seem to be as simple as that with like biology. You could have similarities, right? Complexity, consciousness, maybe. But in terms of matter, it really, on the big scale, you can't say that something with the equal amount of matter as Earth is the same as Earth. It could very well just be a rocky planet. You could just be a Mars. I wouldn't say that that's equal. I'm looking out and I see seagulls and birds, and it's lightly. I think it's raining. It's gonna. You see the ocean. Yeah, no, I wouldn't say that's the same just because it's 1-to-1 in terms of mass. But if you were to zoom out more, literally and metaphorically, yeah, you could say you do hit a certain point and then it does collapse into a star. And there's obviously different categories and types of stars. But I mean, broad strokes, yeah, it collapses into something that emits light. Okay. And then past that, be it a supernova or a hypernova, where it implodes into a neutron star, or a dwarf, or a brown dwarf, white dwarf. There's some low hanging fruit joke in there about race, but it does emit light, and then eventually, the bigger you are, and the more fuel you burn, the rate of fuel you burn, you go faster or smaller. But very broad strokes, you can kind of graph it and be like, yeah, planet, you're gonna implode into a light emitting, heat emitting furnace where the actual nuclei are changing. Right, you're not gonna have that anywhere else. You're not gonna have that on Earth. You're gonna, unless it's like a natural nuclear reactor like the one in Africa. You're really not gonna have that happening anywhere else, or at least not commonly at the same level as you would a star, and then scale up again and go, and then you have something where even light doesn't escape, and it's bigger, and that's a black hole. But it is still all on a chart of more and more matter. I almost wonder if that's like what this is. Like, is there a darkness around something where, I don't know, maybe you go to the oncology ward at a hospital and there's a darkness in the air? Yeah, I would imagine. I went to Ground Zero in 2011. No, 2012. 2012 going into 2013. Maybe it was 20. I don't remember. Um, and it could very well be the power of suggestion, but I'd say it's odd. I'd say it's definitely. unique. It could very well be I know what happened there. If you were to just take me out of a time capsule, maybe it wouldn't. But I feel like the farthest end of egregiousness seems to be the imposition of will. And I think that's what war would be. And maybe on like much smaller scales where you do have a murder, where you do have a rape. I don't know, maybe you'd have, if you had the ability to see it, you would have like a fleeting kind of like demonic apparition. But it's so infrequent, relatively. It's so infrequent that you might not notice it. It might be like solar flares. If you were to just look at like a thermal image of the sun, it's like how often is there like a CME, a coronal mass ejection? I don't think that often. There's one of the things that doesn't happen all the time, and I could be getting it wrong. Maybe that's what happens all the time, but it might be that if you were to, I don't know, look at a like through a trauma vision instead of thermal, if you're looking through trauma vision of say a city, yeah, you'd say, you'd have people falling in love and on first dates, and you dropping kids off at school. You'd have darker things. You'd have people losing family members. You'd have, unemployment, or you'd have blah blah blah, blah or addiction. You kind of see all these like you'd see a whole spectrum of different colors, and they, I don't know, maybe they'd be canceling each other out. If you looked closely though, maybe every once in a while you'd see like a being, it'd be like a density. But if you could like zoom in far enough, maybe you'd see like a being, and it'd be like, oh, that thing has wings. Just imagining if like you're looking at, I don't know, New York from a bird's eye view, just looking at it as through like a motion vision. Maybe you'd see that every once in a while, and that would be like a rape or a murder, where it was the imposition of one's will against the free will of another. And then maybe that would go even farther to war, specifically civilians. You could maybe argue, it would be very loose, but you could maybe argue if it's between two soldiers, warriors, fighters, it's not quite the same. You could argue, yeah, that they're both soldiers, but one of them's defending their homeland, the other's an invader. Sure. You could even say, well, the invader is just some poor that got drafted. Maybe. There'd still be a darkness there, but maybe it wouldn't be as egregious as outright, murder for the sake of murder, rape for the sake of rape. And then maybe when it happens on a big enough scale, in a confined enough area, you see hordes of demons. Like there might be a demonic kind of darkness that coalesces and condenses every time there is like a true violation of one's own free will. And there'd be different spectrums of it. But across the whole earth, you're not necessarily going to see them all, right? It's like a solitary water droplet could fall out of a blue sky. I think we've all like experienced kind of like the weird where there's like a rain shower, but there's no clouds, and you're like, the f- was that? But for the most part, you're probably not really noticing it. You might even just see it as like humidity. But when it starts raining, it's pretty apparent. Even though the solitary water droplets aren't anything really different, they're just so numerous that you look at it, you go, yeah, that's rain. It's like a quantifiably different thing or qualitatively different thing. It's not humidity. It's not a sprinkler. It's an outright downpouring. It has a feeling. It has a smell. It has a sound. It has a vibe in general, right? The days just kind of seem longer. You can't wait to get home and put on something dry and blah 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 blah. it might be that it's not even necessarily unique that there are demonic entities, which themselves might just be hyper condensed negative emotion. I do think demons are real. I want to be clear. I don't want to write it off and go like, oh, it's not an actual demon. It's a projection of your own mind. No, I think there are demons who need to be smited in the name of Jesus Christ. But something like this would be if you wore that same night vision. I don't know. Maybe if you looked over that whatever red night vision, maybe if you looked over like New York City or New Delhi or Tokyo, a huge city where there's probably at least a murder a day. Chicago, Atlanta. And if you were to look closely, you'd probably be able to see like a demon per night or day. But in general, if you just had that night vision and were looking out, I don't think it's necessarily, and it could be wrong. It might be you put them on and we're just surrounded by demons at all times, which I don't even think is that far out. But it's by wearing them in something like Vietnam, where you have a bunch of soldiers that didn't really want to be there. I'm sure you had some gung ho, but you had a bunch of soldiers who didn't really want to be there. And there did seem to be a lot of atrocities, a lot of rape, a lot of civilian slaughter. It might be something there that where it's like the most egregious acts of negativity. Not you lost your job or not, you had to put your dog down, but outright murder, the snuffing out of the sanctity of life. Yeah, I mean, I think it would make sense that there would be a very high density of demons to the point where no, there's nothing different between a single sprinkle from, if I were to dip my, here, I'll get some water on my finger right now from my cup. If I were to flick that and I just saw it dot onto the window, that water droplet's no different than a rainstorm. But you can't really argue that the rainstorm and that are the same experience. They're just entirely different. It might be that it was so notable because it was so frequent. And that would bring me to the point of, and this probably happens around all war zones for all of time. Does it happen in nature? I don't know. I would venture to say no, not even from like an anthropomorphic centrism point of view, but rather there does seem to be something more, and this is a really big brain take. There does seem to be something a little more natural about nature. That's a joke because I'm retarded. I think some animals kill for fun. I think some wolves do. I think like dolphins and killer whales will. But for the most part, I don't think these are like vendettas. I don't think there's like a serial killing lion. I think it's just eating. And it doesn't make the subjective pain that the prey feels any different, but I think it's a little different than somebody in 2025 United States, kidnapping, raping, and killing. I don't really feel like you could say those are the same. But it might be something where in all of warfare throughout all of human history, you do have that presence. And, is it, does it just flow off of it? Do like the demonic entities, do they just flow off of these events? Or is there something where there can be a feedback loop? Like nuclear bombs create such a high temperature over such a large area that it instantly creates massive fires. Fires so large that it starts to actually affect the flowing of air and it creates like self-sustaining firestorms. That doesn't happen when you light a candle. It doesn't happen when you light a bonfire. It doesn't, during a rainstorm, it doesn't always lead to flooding. but it can, and I think it could probably feed back on itself. So it might be that I don't know. Do those demonic uh, vaporizations? What word am I looking for? Demonic condensations. The coming off of it in a high enough density, can it start to influence it? Can it drive soldiers to doing more? Can it drive? And that does by no means does that mean take away the blame. But can it drive them to doing more? Could it drive the madness even farther? And is it there in a just war? I don't even how do you measure that, but could it be done in a just war? If somebody does a breaking and entering and kills an old couple, I would say there absolutely is like a demonic condensation there. When that dude who does the killing gets in a police chase and then dies in a shootout, I don't know if there would be a demonic condensation after that. But yeah, well, the cops took his life, but yeah, but it was justified. So I don't even know like what the what the rules are, what the boundaries are.
Heaven's Harvest Prepper Food, 72 servings per pail, 25 years shelf life. I've had the owner Clayton on the show before. He's a God-fearing, America-loving patriot. Get one of these, get a couple of them, throw them in your basement. It's good to have it, not need it, than to need it and not have it. If you don't want to do that, you can get their seeds. You can plant your own garden, so you don't even have to keep buying them. You can just get the goods and start your own, or you can even get freeze-dried fruits and vegetables like bananas, apples, strawberries, and raspberries. They support the show. It's an honest product. It's a good safety measure to have, and they keep my show free for you. So I'd implore you guys to please go to heavensharvest.com, use the link in the description, promo code TPC. Axios Fitness Coaching is a premium resource for holistic strength and conditioning services. Axios is best known for the Training Club, capital T, capital C, an exclusive community that prioritizes accountability, technique, diet, and nutrition. Everything you need to do to take action against the decay of the modern world. Whether you're looking to improve your physique, build strength, or just take care of your health and fitness, Axios will provide you with the solution that is effective and simple to execute. All you need to do is complete the intake survey, and you can see if you're a good candidate for the training club or any other of the services. And it's going to sponsor the show. So, one company falls off, another one arises. So if you guys like the show, you want to work out, throw the show a couple shekels. Go take the survey. Thank you so much, guys.
Higher ultraviolet exposure is associated with lower mortality. The United Kingdom is a high latitude and low sunlight country. Researchers there collected data on over 360,000 participants in a study of UV exposure via solarium use. When compared with non-users, solarium users had 15% risk lowered of all-cause mortality, 23% lower risk of cardiovascular mortality, 14% lower risk of cancer mortality, and a 12% lower risk of non-cardiovascular, non-cancer mortality. In other words, all other causes. Quoting the researchers, our study adds to the growing evidence that the benefits of UV exposure outweigh the risks in low sunlight environments. A link to the original publication is available in the box below the video. Get some UV light this winter. Immerse yourself in the tranquility of the blue. Visit a Blue Room soon. www.blueroom.com.
But it might be in something as unpopular as the Vietnam War, like the occupation of Iraq. Or it might be if you turned on that night vision, you would see kind of demonic entities. Who knows? Maybe it is like fusion or fission. Maybe when somebody is killed through a purely evil, selfish manner, not self defense, not in nature hunting, not an accidental car crash, but maybe when there is like pure evil, there's the taking of one's life. Maybe it is like fission or fusion. Maybe like an angel breaks off and goes to heaven, and then the only thing left is the negative condensate. Versus if someone dies naturally, maybe the angel and the demon stay intertwined, and then you go into the afterlife or reincarnation or purgatory or whatever. But if it's taken from you, maybe there's like a splitting, like an unnatural splitting. I don't know. Maybe that's what like murder and rape is. Maybe it is like nuclear fusion. Put two things together and then you have released byproducts. But it seemed to be real. Like the people, and maybe it's all horseshit and it's just like LARPing. I have no idea. That could also be the case. But yeah, maybe it's some sort of like soulful psychic nuclear fusion where there's an unnatural splitting. Not unnatural in that back to the laws of physics, like it is still the laws of physics. But other than nuclear reactors or nuclear weapons, you don't have the process of fusion just naturally. I think even the natural nuclear reactor in Africa, the like uranium deposit, even that I believe that's limited to fission. You do have radioactive products, radioactive elements fizzling off with half lives. I don't even know if you need a nuclear reactor. I think it's just the presence of uranium or plutonium or polonium or whatever, strontium 90, technetium, lawrencium. I don't think fusion occurs naturally, actually. I think that's only in stars or above, and then nuclear weapons. So it's not unnatural in that it's still governed by the laws of physics. But it might be like what's happening on Earth are all chemical reactions. It's like, yeah, you eat the banana and, your body, well, even that, you're just breaking down macromolecules. But sure, you mean down to the solitary atom? Sure, you carbon and oxygen and nitrogen, they're all floating between the air, and it could be a tree root and then a toenail and then a wave and, a satellite dish and a shoelace. But you're just kind of recycling the Lego pieces. Whereas fusion is the actual like destroying of a Lego piece into something new. It might be that Earth is for the most part supposed to be like psychic chemical reactions. Something like fusion is unnatural for Earth, not for stars and above. But it might be something like that, to where like that's like an unnatural thing of like what should be, right? Thou shall not kill. And then like nuclear fusion, it might be that builds up over the millennia. Maybe the demons can't leave. Maybe they're a denser thing and they can't. Maybe there's an escape velocity of heaven and hell, not just for orbital mechanics. Maybe there are these byproducts to where the demons are left behind. Who knows? Maybe the demons in Vietnam, maybe all demons throughout all wars in this theory, they would, I mean, kind of like gravity, that they would eventually coalesce. And it might be that they coalesce and you have these kind of like sloshing around, almost like a marble kind of rolling around on a trampoline. And I don't know, maybe they're drawn to areas where new demons are being generated. So it's like the demons in Vietnam, like if you were to look at, I don't know, Iraq during GWAT, you might say like there's so many demons, and but if you were to look closer, maybe some of them were from Vietnam. And the ones in Vietnam, it's like, yeah, that goes all the way back to like the Punic Wars or Carthage or, ancient Babylon or some shit. And they're all just all kind of like cycling around. And who knows? And then maybe that has an effect over the millennia of they start to, like a nuclear firestorm, maybe they feed back on themselves and they start to actually affect the processes that was responsible for their own genesis. It's a feedback loop. I don't know. But it's like I don't know, I think it's like the proton pump in the mitochondria. It's like oxidative stress kind of destroys the self-correcting mechanisms. It's like if you took, like the example I always use for DNA errors, like erroneous replication. It's like if you had a piece of, excuse me. It's like if you had a piece of paper and then you just put it through a copy machine. You got a copy of it, you pulled it out, and then you put it in again, and you made a copy. Not you made 100 copies, but you made 100 successive copies. If you ever messed something up, or if you like nicked it with a pen, that that copy that's now in it for all of the ones going forward. A healthy cell will find that and negate it, snip it out, and whatever. I remember learning about oxidative damage to, I think it was the proton pump. No, that's in the stomach. Whatever it was, some part of it. There was some weird, it looks like a merry-go-round. It was some like proteinaceous structure in the mitochondria. I have no idea. Sue me. It was different in that it's like, imagine if the piece of paper that you were putting through the copier machine, imagine if that was also like the code that the copier ran on, which doesn't really apply anymore because I think it's been like 80 years since we've used punch cards for machines. But imagine if it wasn't just copying a piece of erroneous nature. You put the paper in and there's a mark, and then if you ever get another mark, well, now you have two marks on it. Imagine if that actually was like the source code for the copier. So you would now take a damaged source code. Not only would you have a damaged copy because, right, you got pen on the piece of paper, and now it's going to be on every successive copy. That pen on the piece of paper, it's like a Scantron where they're like, don't circle outside the bubble. It might be that you're feeding that into the copier machine. So now it's like, not only is there a pen mark, it's like fractional reserve banking. It's like for every dollar, deposited, you can lend 9. It's like, not only is there a marker, a pen mark, but that now is also messing up the copier. It's not executing its form correctly. And so although there's one pen mark, maybe the copier is now copying only 99% correctly. So you might have a pen mark and then like another mark indirectly caused by the pen. So now you have 2 marks. Well, and then you feed that back into the machine, and theoretically it should be limited at 2, but now you have 2 source code errors going into the machine. So that might double it or triple it. And it might sometimes offset it, I don't know. But you're pretty much on a downward spiral. And that was like I just remember learning about that. It was like the mitochondria is like the thing making, or getting rid of oxidative stress or electrons, antioxidant is also the thing that's being affected by that process. So it's a self cycling thing. It's like if the water pump plant or whatever is on fire and you're using water to put it out. It's like, yeah, but as it gets damaged, it's not pumping water nearly as efficiently, which means you're spraying less water onto the fire that's damaging the water pump that gets worse and worse. It might be something like that, where it's like the presence of demons is slowly accelerating. I don't know, maybe the genesis of demons. I have no idea. That's a pretty dark realization. But it could also be that in that darkness you have people. So this all implies the genesis of angels. more so than normal. Not the normal night, not the normal, you found $1 or your friend made you laugh. But truly positive things, which I would imagine would be people who give their lives for someone else. People who go above and beyond and do something for no foreseeable gain to themselves. That implies the genesis of angels. It absolutely does. Because to have this one thing exist, the mirror has to exist. And it's not some agreement like, well, you said if we're gonna have demons, you have to have angels. No, I mean, it's the implication. You can't have light and not have darkness because you have to be able to. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a description of light. It wouldn't be something to note. You wouldn't be able to note that something's cold if you're not implying heat, a gradient, an opposite, a difference, a polarity. So you could also maybe, I don't know, maybe it counters it. Maybe maybe it might be separating like a centrifuge. Maybe it's like we're spinning in one end of the centrifuge on some whatever multi-dimensional tube. One end is the earth, so it's just full of demons, and the other end is full of angels, and that's how you, I don't know, you have spin apart a population of souls with free will into heaven and hell. We could argue that's what heaven and hell are, the ends of the tubes. You could have that. That could be one thing. Which would suck, but I don't think that would really stop you from becoming an angel yourself. If it's based on free will, now you could argue as you get farther along in the centrifuge process, it's easier to become a demon because there's demonic influence. But I would argue that no, in the face of darkness, you're kind of forced to choose whether you're going to be good or not. You know, if it's all milk toast and it's just like a random suburban neighborhood and you're 10, you're not really faced with like true tests of your metal. You know, you gotta get older and whatever, do shit. It could also be that the centrifuge of angels and demons both take place on Earth. In which case, although there's a greater number of demons, there's a greater number of angels. It could be that. But I think it could also be in the presence of greater and greater evil, though. I don't know. Maybe you start to have the creation of like really high quality angels, right? Enriched uranium. It's not just uranium. It's that good. Maybe you have like a high centrifuge nature of really good angels, purified because you were forced to. I can try to do the right thing. I can try to be a good friend. I can try to be honest. I can try to do this podcast honorably and be as honest as I can. And to great financial fault of the show, I don't make nearly as much money because I refuse to push any products that are horseshit. But that's like the test of me doing the right thing versus the wrong thing. You could say COVID, the interviews I did there. I am proud of that. I am proud of how I acted. Um, but even that, it wasn't like there were guns in my face. The downfall was like the podcast won't succeed. It's not like I was getting rounded up. It might be that in like very dark times and prison camps or even human traffic, it might be like that's where you have the creation of true angels. You know, that might be like in the cases of what was the Nimitz quote? Uncommon valor was a common virtue. It might be in that furnace you have the creation of like true good deeds. Or it's like no, the good deed results almost virtually in your death. The good deed being like, run out and grab that wounded guy under machine gun fire. Versus now, it's like if the good deed results in like I don't get enough views or I get banned from YouTube. You know, it's not. You can't really compare the two. In which case, I don't know. You would view the demon generation. I mean, you could view it as a blessing. Be like, I get to witness the creation of truly good people, and I have the opportunity myself to. I don't know. And it could be that, this night vision was a peek into it. Now, I would imagine whatever they were using for that night, I would imagine that research didn't stop. They didn't take this. For better or worse, defense scientists, DOD, or even whatever, Nazi Germany, or before that, like whatever, for better or worse, they do push the envelope of research. That Unit 731, hey, they scientific methoded a lot. It wasn't good, but man, they pushed it to the nth degree. You know, what Sam Hyde said. I mean, look at 9/11. It's 19 hijackers who didn't speak a lick of English, but they believed in each other, and look what they got done. It's you can't not respect the thoroughness and foresightedness of a serial killer. If you don't, you're being dishonest. That's a guy that didn't leave behind a single hair for 10 years. You wish you had that completion. That man dots more I's and crosses more T's than an accountant. Like, you wish you were that good. Which is an odd praise. But then the thoroughness for where the fuck am I going with this? Digging myself a little bit of a hole here. Yeah, as the great comedian Ray Kump said, what he admires about Nazis, not his grandpa was a Nazi. He goes, they didn't take anything for granted. They knew that they were getting away with murder, and so they're like, yeah, what happens if you boil them? They just went for it all. That's not really getting out of this hole easily. The truest form of capitalism is us taking the mangled steel from the World Trade Center, which probably bore a whole bunch of hallmarks of, I don't know, thermite burns and directed energy weapons from orbit. That aside, we took that steel and within a week had sold it to China for scrap. I mean, that's that capitalist spirit. What actually was the point of this? Respect, thoroughness, evil, good, condense, doing the good thing, doing the bad thing. Oh, defense scientists, night vision. I would imagine they kept researching that. Why wouldn't you? Even if, let's say, you're not just some evil scientist, waxing your mustache. Just for the sake of being serious, why wouldn't you look into that? Why wouldn't you want to understand it? Why can't it be a good thing? Why can't you look into that? Why can't you have some, like, deeply Christian nation that's like, we're going to research how to find these goddamn demons and we're going to kill them all? Demon glasses to every man, woman, and child so you can see these from a mile away. It can be good, I think. It can be a positive idea. I don't think I've ever actually seen a fire truck with its ladder extended. But sure enough, they are. Is that reaching into a tree or to a house? I think they're on that roof. I wonder if a tree fell. Um, yeah, I mean, I would definitely see them. I mean, Phenomena by Annie Jacobson, Uri Geller. They do all this shit. They were remote seers. Rob McGonagall was one of them. Uri Geller, I think, was like the spoon bending guy. The remote viewers, McGonagall. There were others. I always just remember McGonagall. But they were legit doing this shit, and like they were pretty accurate. Um, yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you use it? They used them for the capturing of a United Nations general, I think, in the 80s to find him. Oh yeah, and one of the guys they used for it, they embedded him. I'm just not remembering it. It's from, I'm pretty sure it's from the book Phenomena. They embedded the guy, the remote viewer. They embedded him in Delta Force. That's not like that's not for shits and giggles. There was some actionable intelligence or potential. And even if not, they believed that there could be. It might be that like some new ammunition or laser sucks, but by the time you're deploying it in Delta Force, there's legitimate reason to believe it could be the next big thing. Even if it doesn't pan out. It's like the very fact that you were brought to go try out for some NFL team. It means like, hey dog, there was that ain't nothing. The creepy shit about Phenomena is a lot of it, I think, eventually there was it was above like 50% chance, which is what you would expect from pure chance. I think it was like 60-40 or 70-30, which is a pretty big deviation from just flipping a coin. And they did all sorts, double blind, triple blind. They did, you could argue you'll never hear about the successful stuff. Okay. But the fact that there's been so many books written about the experiments they were doing kind of leads me to believe that it probably didn't go anywhere. Not because I don't think it did, not because I don't want it to be true. It just, you know, if a technology really takes off, you're not going to like slowly declassify stuff that's always 20 years behind because in a way you're still kind of leading breadcrumbs and telling people where to go, where to look. If you wanted to not have people, figuring out the B-21 Raider, you would keep shit classified all the way back through the B2, back through the F-117, back through the SR-71. You would block off the entrance to the maze. You wouldn't slowly, remove fog as you went along so people could follow you, even if decades behind. You would keep the entire thing classified. So the fact that we hear so much about all this different shit, ESP and telekinesis and telepathy and mind reading and remote viewing and, you know, teleportation, the fact that we hear so much about it leads me to believe it didn't really pan out in a meaningful way. That's just what they want you to think. Okay, but you can use that, you can apply that to anything. And be like, what, no matter what they tell us, it's a lie. It's like, well, it's like the people who no matter what are like, oh, more distraction for the goy. It's like, at a certain point you have to admit you do have some form of like cuckoldry. When you can't take a win no matter what. It's either outright, oh, the Jews are doing it, or it's like, oh, they're giving the goy some bait. It's like, dude, you want to lose. When no matter what, you find a way to be negative about it, you want to lose. Whether or not you think you want to, you have some deep thing in you that wants to lose, or has been conditioned to lose, or has been conditioned to be hurt when you don't win, so you're trying to avoid pain. So it might not even be what I'm talking about. the fact that the trail does kind of end with the demons and the night vision tells me that that did pan out. Which is. But that also would tell me that there was probably some equal research or unintentional research into heavenly beings. And it could be that it's all classified. I think we would all assume the people in power are evil, and they look at this as a way to get their evil friends, the demons, to help them. But I would say it would be in their interest to never declassify anything that implies angels, because they wouldn't want you to know that you're not alone, that you do have allies around you at all times. So I don't know. That is how a solo rant is done. An hour. Unplanned. Yeah, I'm actually kind of proud of how that one. I was not sure early on. I was very not sure about how that one was going to pan. I liked that. Actually, I liked that. That came out. There's the angels. But seriously, guys, angels are real. Demons are real. Pray to the Lord Jesus Christ. Pray to God. Pray for infinite love and empathy to be a better person. And you will rise each other up as I will help to rise you. And I hope you help to rise me because God is good. All right, guys. I love you.